Now we shall open plenary 10 panel discussion on a very interesting subject and a very technical one, I guess, decoding the greenwashing and green blushing bars. May I please invite on stage Mr. Ian Berger, Chairman, International Corporate Governance Network, ICGN, Mr. Bill Carr, Partner, Head of India Desk, CMS Cameron McKenna Navarro, Allswang LLP as speakers, with CS Manoj Sonawala, Chairman, Manoyog GRC Advisors as the Chairman moderator for this panel discussion. Welcome you on the stage, sir.
Good afternoon, friends. Post-lunch sessions are always difficult for both speakers and participants, but my co-panelists are technically so sound that I can assure you, they will keep you awake. And after listening to them, you will be awakened from your slumber, because what they are going to talk about is really worth listening. The topic, as he rightly said, is a very technical, but let me give you some kind of a background. This concept of greenwashing has emerged in the late 80s and early 90s. As the environmental movement gained some momentum and companies began to realize that consumers were increasingly concerned about the environmental impact of the products they were buying. Now, since the awareness increased, the greenwashing became rampant world over. Presently, due to easy communication, increased awareness, and high level of expectations, the claims made by companies are easily challenged or see-through in the current scenario. Now, all stakeholders, including regulatory authorities and monitoring agencies world over, have started keeping close watch on such tall claims, which are without any substantial supporting facts and figures and documents, and general in nature. Now, the concept of greenwashing has become increasingly relevant more and more because companies make environmental claims in their marketing materials. Because of the rise of the consumerism in late 80s and 90s, the mass production of cheap end products which doesn't last for a longer time is increasingly more available. Tech industries, especially, has been accused of planned or built-in obsolescence. It's a linear economy, and we all know most of the technical gadgets become outdated or obsolete within short time. Hence, consumers have started changing their preferences. They are insisting or inviting recycled or recyclable versions of the products, product being sustainable. And that is how the sustainability comes into the play. I'll first try to give you a difference between greenwashing and green blushing. In greenwashing, generally what happens? Companies in their marketing strategies or advertising make tall, exaggerated claim without any supporting, without any required work done in terms of sustainability. This is greenwashing. Now, then greenwashing can be two types: purposeful, that is intentional, and accidental, that is unintentional. Be it unintentional or purposeful, both are dangerous or risky or not acceptable. The reason is both damages the reputation, gives a very bad name for the corporate. It may amount to legal cases, and there are lots of damages, which I'll cover later on. As against washing, green blushing is exactly opposite, where corporates underplay, downplay, or make an understatement of their sustainability efforts. And they don't tom-tom about their achievements in terms of sustainability. They don't say that they have done something or they have created a product which is otherwise environmental friendly. So this is green blushing. Now, greenwashing and green blushing are two opposite phenomena related to a company's environmental performance and communication. See, performance and communication. So both intervene and becomes a greenwashing or green blushing. Now, as I said, it is an exaggerated claims, so we know it is not correct. But why green blushing is difficult or dangerous? Because it is not harming otherwise, right? At least to the consumers. But how it adversely affects this green blushing? This green blushing makes the corporate to allow or to slip their opportunities of presenting their environmental efforts, sustainable efforts, and which otherwise will be not conducive with the investors which are investing in such kind of firms. See, green blushing refers to the act of downplaying or under-communicating a company's environmental or sustainability performance. And this is the reluctance of the corporate because of the two things. One, they want to avoid allegations of greenwashing, and otherwise also they don't want to be termed as a boastful. So this is how this green blushing and greenwashing is differentiated or is in the vogue. Now both greenwashing and green blushing needs to be avoided, as both can be risky for the companies, albeit in different ways, and can be harmful to companies' sustainability efforts. Why company will, see, we all know why company will indulge into greenwashing, either purposeful or unintentionally, because they want to take a benefit of the ignorance of the consumers, or they know that still the industry or the regulatory scenario is not very robust, which can catch them. So they want to take advantage of it. So in the greenwashing, the companies, corporates are intentionally trying to take benefit or advantage of such kind of a situation. Now, everybody knows about that greenwashing and the advantages companies are taking. But why one would indulge into green blushing, which is more important? Now, in the case of green blushing, why corporates are indulging is for the reasons that they lack confidence. This lack of confidence in the companies that are uncertain, they are uncertain about their sustainability performance. They are maybe hesitant to promote their sustainability initiatives for fear of being accused of greenwashing, or a perception that the sustainability initiatives are not strong enough. They are not ready to face any scrutiny of any NGOs or any authorities, regulatory or monitoring agencies, or any such activities. They are downplaying because they want to avoid any negative attention. Second reason may be they have a limited resources, because of which they are not going ahead with their making their claim so rampant or so authoritatively. They also might be feeling that their customers in that particular industry are not very demanding or not expecting any such sustainability efforts or eco-friendly products. So that may be one of the reason. And some companies may simply not prioritize sustainability as a strategic objective and may view sustainability initiative as nice to have. And they, rather than a core component of their business strategy, they would rather indulge into avoiding or making a green blushing. Now, we will be wondering, is there any guidelines or framework for green blushing? Greenwashing guidelines and all will come back. But is there any guideline for green blushing? Because green blushing also is a dangerous thing or risky for the corporates. Now, there are currently no specific or widely recognized guidelines or frameworks specifically for green blushing, as it is relatively a new concept that has emerged as a counterpoint to greenwashing. So there are no guidelines. Now, green blushing is a relatively new concept and has not yet been widely studied or addressed by industry groups or regulatory bodies. However, there are several best practices that companies can follow, and there are various guidelines and frameworks that companies can use to ensure that their sustainability claims are accurate and credible, and to avoid the appearance of green blushing. There are certain guidelines available like GRI, ISO 14001, then the Carbon Trust Standards, and the Federal Trade Commissions. There are various things available. Now, this greenwashing and green blushing, how it affects the governance part. See, our basic conference is pertaining to the governance. So we have to check or resilient with the greenwashing and good governance, how these two are linked. Now, good governance involves transparency and honesty in business practices, which includes being truthful in environmental claims. Now, greenwashing is against that, involves making exaggerated claims or misleading environmental claims, which goes against the principles of good governance. That is first. Now, second, the good governance includes considering the interest of all stakeholders, including environment and society, whereas greenwashing harms both the environment and the society. The third thing, the good governance involves accountability and responsibility for actions, whereas greenwashing can undermine accountability by making difficult for stakeholders to assess a company's true environmental impact. So, if you see, this greenwashing is totally against the good governance. Nowadays, we are talking about ESG. Everybody is familiar. I think in earlier 9 sessions, you must have every time heard the word ESG. So we have to see how this greenwashing can be intertwined with ESG. There are several ways. ESG investing is a growing trend, and many investors are looking for companies that are committed to sustainability and social responsibility. See, greenwashing makes themselves appear more environmentally and socially responsible than they actually are, and these investors get lured by such tall claims. Greenwashing can be particularly problematic in the context of ESG investing because it can lead to investors making decisions based on the false or misleading information. And this can harm both investors and the companies they invest in, as well as the environment and the society more broadly. The detailed discussion pertaining to the investors and investing funds will be taken up by one of my colleagues. Now, we will wonder, is there any legal framework to curb this greenwashing is available? Because this greenwashing is beyond boundaries. Greenwashing is not limited to any particular geographic location or any particular industry sector. As I said, it is rampant world over and across the industry. In fact, as the demand for sustainable products and services continues to grow globally, the risk of greenwashing is also increasing, and it can occur in any country or industry. Now, can you understand? See, the more there is a demand for sustainable products and eco-friendly products, we must have seen everything is we are consuming also is whether it is organic or non-organic. So when the expectations are high and there are less standards or less frameworks or clear guidelines available, the truant companies are lured to undergo or practice this greenwashing. Multinational companies may use different sustainability standards and messaging in different regions, which can contribute to confusion. Now, see, it is not that it is in one geography. Most of the times, multinational companies, they ignorantly indulge into greenwashing because in one geography, they may have a different kind of a standards or requirements, and in another geography, there may be different. So when I said first, purposeful, that is intentional and unintentional, certain MNCs may be unintentionally entering into the greenwashing area. Now, to address greenwashing beyond boundaries, it is important to have globally recognized standards and certifications for sustainability that are rigorously enforced. Now, let us understand status of greenwashing guidelines and regulations in other geographies. Because unless we understand that, it is very difficult to understand greenwashing in different geographies. My friend will take EU and UK in detail, but I'll just run through the basic things. Several countries and regions around the world have issued guidelines or regulations against greenwashing, and we'll take the Western countries first, United States. In the United States, the Federal Trade Commission has issued guidelines on environmental marketing claims known as the Green Guides. Now, the Green Guides are not legally binding, but the FTC can take legal action against companies that make false or misleading environmental claims. See, all the geographies and all the guidelines across the geography and across the industry are saying the same thing, or more or less, that your claim or your company should make your marketing material or advertising material, which should be truthful and non-deceptive. Your claims for environment should be clear. Green Guides also prohibit false or misleading claims, such as using unqualified terms like eco-friendly or green. You must have seen that many advertisements in the background, they are showing greenery or using organic things, whereas nothing of that sort in their environmental sustainability plan or strategy, this kind of things appears. So it's a wrong or a deceptive claim. Now come to European Union. The European Union has implemented the Green Claims Regulation, which sets out rules for companies making environmental claims in their advertising. Let's then come to Canada. Competition Bureau in Canada has in 2019 issued guidelines for the environmental claims, a guide for industry and advertisers which provides guidance for companies making environmental claims in their advertising on how to avoid making false or misleading representations. Then let's go to Australia. The Australian Competition and Consumer Commission, that is ACCC, has issued Green Marketing and the Australian Consumer Law Guide in 2019. The guide also outlines the penalties for making false or misleading environmental claims. UK here, the Advertising Standards Authority in the United Kingdom has issued guidelines for companies making environmental claims in the advertising. Independent organizations like certifying products as environment friendly, such as Forest Stewardship Council, the Rainforest Alliance, and the Energy Star program are some of the names which can be available for the separate certifications. Competition and Market Authority, that is CMA, has published Green Claims Code in 2021, which will be dealt with by Bill. Right, Bill?
That's absolutely right.
Fine. So these are the few geographies. Now, these are just a few examples, and many other countries and regions have also enacted laws and regulations to address greenwashing, such as China's Green Advertising Law and Brazil's Consumer Protection Code. So there are various geographies have different kind of requirements, or they have issued guidelines. Now let's understand a few high-profile case laws filed for greenwashing. I'll name some of them. Volkswagen clean diesel claim. Now in that, Volkswagen faced numerous lawsuits and regulatory fines and ultimately settled with the US government and paid billions of dollars in fines and compensation to affected customers. Tesco everyday value light bulbs in 2010. This was also one of the goof up Tesco had made, and Tesco was fined 300,000 euros by the Advertising Standard Authority. Then KFC, Rainforest Alliance certified coffee was introduced by KFC. The certificate was not issued by Rainforest Alliance as claimed, and KFC did not have permission to use the Rainforest Alliance logo in its advertising, and hence KFC was fined 7,500 euros by the ASA. H&M, there are few others which will be taken care of by my other colleagues. You must be wondering, most of them are India. These are also Indians, most of them. So why India? So where India stands? Now, India has taken some step towards developing guidelines to prevent greenwashing. In 2018, the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change released a guideline for environmentally sustainable practices. In addition, the Advertising Standard Council of India has released guidelines for green marketing and advertising. These are all the problematic areas and the guidelines and frameworks which we have spoken about. Now, do we have solutions? In last 2 days, we have heard about the AI, machine learning, and many other such things of which are technology related. Now, can we use the technology to identify or curb greenwashing? Because nowadays, without technology, I think we are crippled. When I say use of technology, the consumers are also techno-savvy and they can find out, as I said earlier, because of the communication easily available, things are becoming more and more difficult for corporates who are making unnecessary or false claims or tall claims. So how this technology can be used, put to use to either curb or minimize the difficulty in greenwashing. One way technology can be used is through the development of tools that can automatically analyze and assess the accuracy of green marketing claims. For example, machine learning algorithms can be trained to identify keywords and phrases commonly associated with greenwashing and then flag products or services that use those phrases for further investigation. The use of data analytics and machine learning algorithms can be put to use for such kind of requirements. Now, another approach is to create a database or a registry of verified environment-friendly products and services. When I'm talking about all these things, we are talking about mainly data, and my friend will talk about the accuracy of the data in his address. Technology can also be used to curb greenwashing is through the development of certification and labeling programs that are backed by independent verification and validation processes. These programs can be supported by blockchain technology, again a new technology which is very rampant and otherwise very helpful. Those who are investing in coins must be knowing the blockchain technology. So this blockchain technology, which provides a transparent and immutable record of the product's environmental impact through its life cycle. When I say life cycle, means right from the sourcing of raw material till the end of the life or disposal of the product is covered. In addition, the blockchain technology can be used to create a transparent and secure system for tracking the environmental impact of products and services throughout their life cycle. Overall, technology has the potential to be a powerful tool in the fight against greenwashing by enabling more accurate and transparent communication about the environmental impact of products and services. Finally, consumers can use technology to research and verify the environmental claims made by companies. This can include using online resources such as environmental databases and product comparison websites. See, there are product comparison websites. Even in India, we have that kind of a facility available. These websites are to compare products and their environmental impact. And consumer can also use social media to share information about greenwashing practices and hold companies accountable for their environmental claims. Now, see if any corporate is indulging into greenwashing and what damages that can be envisaged for the greenwashing. Now, the damage to reputation of the firm, reputation is and in consumer trust is eroded throughout. Now, if the company has made false or misleading environmental claim, they may be less likely to purchase its products or services in the future. So if I know a company has given me a product which is not environment friendly or as per the claims which the company has made, I may not go ahead and buy that product next time. There are possibility of legal liability. Company may be fined or face legal action from the consumers or regulatory agencies. If you know, there is a class action suit filed against Volkswagen, right? Earlier, fine. So these kind of legal liabilities are also there. There are increased regulatory scrutinies. So once bitten, twice shy. If a company has been caught in indulging into greenwashing, next time their advertised or products will be more scrutinized in detail. So company may face the increased regulatory scrutiny in a different way. Now there is an increased competition, and this increased competition is from the companies that make genuine efforts to reduce their environmental impact. So if a company has been judged or has been labeled as indulging into greenwashing, the other company, which is a competitive company and using not false claim, using the right claims, using the sustainability strategies and doing environmental things, they will propagate against that company which is caught in the greenwashing. So these companies which are caught in the greenwashing will face more competitions. Now there will be an increased cost for the company which is indulging into the greenwashing, because such companies have to rebrand or repositioning their products or services. They may also need to invest in more rigorous sustainability programs and reporting to avoid future accusations for the greenwashing. Now, see, these are the kind of a disadvantages or damages. And what are the backlashes from a variety of stakeholders? There are consumers. See, when we say stakeholders, it's a very wide connotation or wide term. So when we speak about stakeholders, there are consumers, and these consumers may take their businesses elsewhere, resulting in lost sales and revenues for the company. They may also share their negative experience with others, either through social media or word of mouth or online reviews. Then there are environmental groups. Nowadays, a new breed has come up, these NGOs or action groups. So environmental groups publicly criticize companies that engage in greenwashing and may launch campaign to raise awareness about the issue. These campaigns can generate negative publicity and damage the company's reputation. Then there are investors. Investors may be less likely to invest in companies that engage in greenwashing, particularly if they are concerned about the company's reputation or potential legal liability. So nobody would like to invest in a company which is likely or going to be penalized or may have a deficit in their reputation. Then regulatory agencies. Regulatory agencies may investigate companies that engage in greenwashing and may impose fines or other penalties. Then competitors, of course, we spoke about. So overall, backlash from greenwashing can be significant for companies, resulting in lost sales, damage to reputation, legal liability, increased cost, and increased regulatory scrutinies. And to avoid greenwashing, companies can take several steps. Now, see, when we say somebody is indulging into greenwashing, so we have to give them the possibilities or offer them the facilities. Then how these corporates can also be indulged into, or they abide by the rules and regulations or frameworks or guidelines. Now, companies should ensure that any environmental claims they make are accurate and substantiated by scientific evidences. So we have to insist to the corporates to do that. Now, my friend will take care of the how governance professional, as a governance professional, you can indulge into appraising your board members in against the greenwashing or how to overcome the greenwashing difficulties. Then you can use third-party certifications, which we spoke about many. Then use transparent reporting for the companies, which can provide detailed information about their environmental impact and sustainability initiatives. Now, mainly the companies should be made to feel that they should avoid greenwashing traps, as making vague or general claims, using misleading visuals, or making claims that are technically true but misleading in context. This is a trap which companies generally get into. Then last but not least, adopt a comprehensive sustainability strategy, then which goes beyond marketing claims and addresses the company's overall environmental impact. This can include efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emission, minimize waste, conserve natural resources, and support biodiversities. I spoke about the third-party certifications twice, but this third-party certification is available for greenwashing claims. Now, this third-party certification is a process in which an independent organization assesses a company's environmental claims to verify that they are accurate and meet certain standards. When I spoke about the UK regime, I spoke about the all few independent agencies which are available for such kind of a certification. Now, I'll name few more: eco labels, environmental management systems, which is again as ISO 14001, then life cycle assessments. These are few labels or individual independent certification agencies. There are several institutes in India also that provide third-party certification for environmental claims, which are Bureau of Indian Standards, that is BIS, Indian Green Building Council, IGBC, Center for Science and Environmental, that is CSE, and last but not the least, which is not very famous but which is very effective, Cradle to Cradle Products Innovation Institute, that is C2CPII. Now, see, we have to see what is the way forward available so that this greenwashing can be avoided. We have to educate consumers through increased awareness. See, consumers are the king, and consumers have to be made aware who can play a major role in getting things differently registered. This greenwashing tactics can be curbed by making consumers more aware and resilient. Then we have to have a collaboration and building partnerships. Now, when I say collaboration, this collaboration has to be with the stakeholders, including government agencies, business and civil society organizations. NGOs play a critical role, as I said earlier. Then we have to have a transparent and disclosure, which are transparency and disclosures for companies, which by making their environmental impact data publicly available and easily accessible. Then we can have a media campaign. This media campaign also can help advertising and social through raising awareness about greenwashing. We can have stronger government regulations and enforcement. This mechanism is available or can make available to prevent and penalize greenwashing. Third-party certification, as I said. Then integration of sustainability into business strategies, which also we spoke about. Now, another thing is, when I said about technology, this fostering innovation, that innovation can help drive sustainability by promoting new technologies and business models that reduce the environmental impact. Now, if you know, government can, and they do fund many sandbox and pilot initiatives that promote innovation and sustainability. So with this, I would like to rest my address here, and I would request Bill to give his presentation, and then we can have a question answers. Over to Bill.
I'm rather conscious of time, so
Yes.
I'll go through this quite quickly.
Yes.
So I was going to talk about sort of the direction of travel for legal and the regulatory environments in the UK and Europe. So focusing on consumer protection, advertising standards, financial services and reporting. So consumer protection standards, those are being upgraded in the UK around Europe to focus on environmental claims and sustainability. So our Competition and Markets Authority has published a Green Claims Code, which deals with B2B and B2C work and sets out principles to be applied, which includes a requirement that environmental claims have to be truthful, accurate, clear, substantiated, and should not omit or hide important relevant information. And the CMA is going to use that code to monitor, investigate, and potentially prosecute companies that get it wrong. And the CMA's powers are also being increased in the UK. So there's new legislation going through which will allow the CMA to fine companies for breaches of consumer law, which would include the greenwashing arrangements up to 10% of a company's worldwide turnover. So that's going to be quite a significant new power. In the EU, so the Green Claims Directive has been mentioned, so that's being brought in by the EU, and it's going to ban use of terms like environmentally friendly or carbon neutral unless the products have been properly certified. So you have to go through a certification process with a proper certifying body to be able to use those sort of words. And they will also have a requirement that claims need to be substantiated through authorized methodologies. Those methodologies have not been published yet, but the direction of travel is that there's more regulation and more codes for people to be complying with. So the second area is advertising. So they're advertising standards authorities in most European countries, which regulate adverts. And they have limited powers, but they do have a power to ban adverts. So our UK Advertising Standards Authority has issued some guidance recently, which focus on the use of words like net zero and carbon neutral and again require companies to be substantiating their claims and having clear claims. And the ASA has also been fining companies. So they fined Etihad for, actually, when I say fine, they required Etihad to withdraw an advert about plane travel, which was claiming the plane travel was sustainable on the basis that they couldn't prove that. And there have also been claims by advertising standards in Holland and Switzerland. So in Holland, that was against KLM, the Dutch plane company, when it was talking about carbon offsets for air travel, and it couldn't substantiate what we were saying. And Switzerland's bringing a claim against FIFA for the 2022 World Cup, Football World Cup. So the various claims about that being carbon neutral, again, that hasn't been substantiated. So those are examples of where our advertising regulators are getting much more severe. On the investment side, so both the EU and the UK have brought in or are bringing in what's called a green taxonomy, which regulates how you can label investment products. So if you want to label investment products as green or sustainable, they have to comply with that taxonomy. So that taxonomy has been published in the EU. It's been delayed in the UK. And then on financial services, so our Financial Conduct Authority, which regulates financial services, it's going to be publishing new rules on to tackle greenwashing, something called Sustainable Development Principles. And they're going to require asset managers and owners to disclose how they take sustainability into account, to report on sustainability impacts and on risks and opportunities which are associated with that. And that disclosure is likely to be linked to our taxonomy. So that's coming over the line. The other thing which is relevant is reporting. So the UK's brought regulations in last year which require large UK registered companies to disclose climate related financial information in their reporting accounts. So that comes in from April 2022. And the EU has brought in a corporate sustainability reporting directive, which applies to large and listed EU companies and large third country companies, so overseas companies, which either do substantial business in the EU or have got securities listed in the EU. So that could apply to Indian companies doing large amounts of business in the EU. And that requires disclosure of information on sustainability matters affecting the company and the company's impact on sustainability matters. So all of that is coming into place. That reporting will start in 2025, but it's obviously of relevance to large businesses. And I think the key point on here is the reporting standards that will sit beneath that. So those reporting standards are in the process of being developed by various bodies. And the EU is working with a number of bodies which have already got standards to try to ensure that the standards don't cut across each other, and where companies are already meeting standards, they're not required to meet sort of different standards. So there's a bit of cohesion in it. But all of that is coming into force and all of that is relevant. So there's similar things happening in the States and other jurisdictions. So that was sort of the legal regulatory bit. The other side is risk. So we've talked about sort of the risk of consumers getting upset, things like that. But there are more hard-centered risks around claims. So there are numbers of claims started off in the States, developing in other parts of Europe by either activist investors or by regulators against companies where those companies are using claims which are not substantiated about their green credentials. So I won't go into that into a huge amount of detail, but we are seeing more claims against directors for directors failing to comply with their duties, sometimes by not having the right information in their reports, sometimes by not saying enough about what's happening on their sustainability initiatives. I guess sort of one example of that, so that was in Australia. So there was a claim brought against the Commonwealth Bank of Australia about its annual report 3 or 4 years ago, because that annual report did not talk about the debt financing they were providing to the Adani mine in Australia. So that claim was withdrawn after CBI issued a new report which did talk about that. So all of that is relevant from a risk perspective. The other risk area is how investors approach all of this. So I think you're going to talk a bit about that. But sort of investors are subject to their own obligations on reporting on green issues. And to be able to meet that, they need information from investee companies. So if investee companies are not producing the right data and the right information to back it up, they are less likely to get those sort of investments. So I know we're running out of time, so I'll stop there. Over to you.
Thank you, Bill, and good afternoon, everybody, and particularly to those online as well. I understand there's 2,500 people online, so I hope you're still with us. So my role here is to give the investor perspective, and needless to say, I think my two colleagues here have recognised that greenwashing and green blushing is apparent for investors as well as for corporates. So let me go through some of those key characteristics, but I will be as brief as possible to allow for questions. So I'm keen to make sure this is as relevant to you guys as it can be. So. Investors are subject to significant oversight by their stakeholders, and Bill, Manoj have both sort of alluded to those. Some of the codes and policies, and there are a raft of them that come through the stakeholders. The regulations are clear, things like a variety of codes, green claims codes. A lot of investors have also signed up to Net Zero Asset Management Initiative. Yes, that's a voluntary sign up, but there's a huge amount of reporting and requirements that come with that affiliation. There's also other stakeholders within the investment universe that are putting pressure onto those investors to ensure that they're not greenwashing. So things like Morningstar and Influence Map and the like. But the emphasis really is on investors to improve the quality and the consistency of reporting. So for the past few years, really the focus has been around it's not simply okay for investors to explain their approach to ESG and sustainability. They have to demonstrate the impact of their approach and justify any of their green claims. So that comes down to the quality of data. This impact reporting is getting more and more onerous for investors, as it is for companies as well. I hear those comments on a fairly regular basis, but really I should cite that it does start to drive in part investors' own investment processes. And which leads me kind of onto what's the greatest fear of investors in this whole greenwashing angle. And surprise, surprise, it's the regulators. That's the biggest fear. The UK Financial Conduct Authority, the Securities and Exchange Commission in the US, and other regulators across the world are really upping their resources and willingness to levy fines and ultimately sanctions on investors is fairly high. So that is a key fear from the investment community. So I think while the oversight of investors and fears of regulatory sanctions are really well grounded, the commercial reality and an investor's own sustainability cannot be ignored. They've recognised that sustainable funds are hugely commercial. So thinking about client demand, for example, one investor recently told me that a majority of their new clients in Europe expect ESG to be a key consideration in the investment decision-making process. So it's no longer it's a reason to do. It's no longer a reason to do business. It's a must-do for investors these days. So it's not just greenwashing, really. It's not just a consideration for sustainable investors. As I say, clients are demanding it. For those medium and large investors in the UK and Europe, it's an expectation that ESG is a key part of investment processes. And ergo, along comes a reporting requirement that is scrutinised by the multitude of stakeholders that we've talked about. But the recent high growth and expectations of ESG and sustainable funds can be explained in many ways, and you'll see many reports around that exponential growth in ESG and sustainable fund offerings. I'd like just to cite one report from a Big Four firm that really kind of highlights the magnitude of this growth. And what they're recognizing here is that global AUM, assets under management in ESG funds, is expected to grow by 86% by 2026. And you break that down by jurisdictions, and you can see that the more developed jurisdictions like Europe, which is expected to grow by about 53%, versus the US, perhaps a little less down the line on the whole sustainability, greenwashing angle. They're expected to double, with the APAC region looking to triple their ESG assets under management over the next 2-3 years. So there's a significant growth coming through, or expected significant growth, I should highlight. We have a lawyer in the room. So as well as regulators getting more resourced, investors' approach to ESG has been getting more and more sophisticated. And I'm sure that each of you have a strategy for how and what type of investors you look to attract and retain on your share registers. But really suffice to say that there will be studies showing that ESG and sustainable investors have many of the key characteristics that are attractive to companies to have on their share registers, particularly developed market active investors, I should highlight, that seek to support their investee companies. So how are the leading sustainable and responsible, or ESG, investors identifying and managing and retaining green, sustainable and positive ESG investment offerings? Well, it differs from firm to firm, but there is some commonality. So common really among investors, their reliance on external data. The quality of data is hugely important, and we can talk about how that's improving later if the questions come through. But so it's not just the data providers, it's also the rating agencies. There's a reliance upon those. So fundamentally, as a corporate, if you're not accurately reflected by the key data providers, your company as an investment opportunity is not necessarily, I'd argue, is not being maximized. So green blushing or hushing by companies is definitely something that I've witnessed, and likewise witnessed greenwashing examples too. So if you are a corporate looking to attract sustainable investors, it's very wise to deliberately engage with the key data providers and rating agencies that are out there. This can ensure your company is accurately reflected in their reports and data feeds that investors use and ultimately rely upon. So trying to wrap up here, but you'll be aware that many investors put a lot of effort into stewardship, that whole engagement and voting side of things. While the primary drivers for investors of stewardship activities are really to understand their investments better and to seek improved outcomes, they're also a key driver for investors is the use of stewardship to combat greenwashing claims, and also to understand better ensure that they're not exposed to greenwashing. So that whole engagement and voting is a huge part of investors' toolkit, and they're looking to use that more and more, and will be using that more and more. So in terms of the future, while over the past year we've seen political pressure in the US against ESG and sustainability, the polar opposite really has been the case in other developed and developing markets, where we expect the regulatory requirements and oversight to increase, as well as increase the demand for ESG and sustainable products. I'm recognizing that we're close to time, so I'm going to pause here. I'd love to take any questions that you might have. And I'll leave it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. See, you spoke about the institutional investors and funds, which is likely to increase by 86% and all. So there is a network, there is a new kind of a greenwashing emerging, known as greenwashing by association. When asset managers include firms in their green portfolio based on the tall and exaggerated firms' claims. So ESG credentials and present their portfolios as sustainable to investors. So how you look at it?
Yeah, and that lends it into the whole investment process. So as I say, investors have been investing in their own resources. You will have seen on average, particularly in the UK and Europe, on average, ESG or responsible investment teams have doubled in size in terms of staff. That grew, and that has also the pattern, the path of the investment process is also moving into the traditional investment roles you see within investment houses. So that what all that leads to is that rigor and analysis that investors are doing on those companies to ensure that, as you say, greenwashing by association is something that they've got at least a minimum of defense against because of the research and analysis they're doing, but also recognizing those companies that are potentially subject to greenwashing claims.
Fine. Would you like to add something?
I guess sort of what some investors do have is within their investment documents an ability to get out of investments where those investments are non-compliant. You see it more in relation to investments in Africa by DFIs, but some investors do have an ability to get out and be paid their investment sum. So I guess for investee companies, that may be a relevant factor.
Yeah, and I think for a relatively liquid asset, it's straightforward to divest. Yes. But when we're moving into that more of that illiquid market, the PE market, for example, where divestment is not quite as straightforward, that's where that engagement and the voting really comes into play.
Okay. So there is also a more worrisome variant where companies provide so-called green finance to bankroll carbon-intensive firms. So that is also a kind of a worrisome item where they do not use the capital to pivot their business models away from fossil fuels. So how you take it?
Yeah, I think with the outset, when we started seeing green bonds, for example, being issued, that was somewhere around sort of 5-6 years ago. There were some observations around the use of those funds. They're not necessarily being ring-fenced for green activities. Now, I think that's less so. Personal belief, I think that's a whole lot less so now. There's a whole lot more scrutiny around and ring-fencing of those assets. So it's not. I don't think it's the problem that it once was.
Okay. So without naming, would you like to elaborate with your SEC experience?
With what, sorry?
Without naming the client, would you like to?
Don't think I'm allowed to.
Fine. So how finance industry can navigate misleading ESG claims presented to consumers and regulators and find remedies as greenwashings are evolving and intensifying in absence of clear definition and guidelines?
Yeah, the whole. Sorry,
he can give better answer.
Well, I guess if you look at a European or UK context,
yes.
All of those guidelines are coming in. They're not in at the moment, but they are coming in. And I guess what I would say is sort of for it's up to companies to engage in the process of setting all those standards and guidelines so as they are ones which they are able to comply with without imposing a huge amount of bureaucracy on those companies. There will be a process of consultation to do all of that. But the last thing I think the industry wants to see is guidelines and rules which are too expensive to monitor, too expensive to comply with. And then you end up with a process which just doesn't work for anyone. So I guess that would be my comment, really.
Let Ian also say something.
I'd dive into the whole definitional arguments and lack thereof of commonality of definitions is a recognised problem. It has been a recognised problem since this whole movement started, and really started sort of 2 decades ago. We are now starting to get more commonality with things like the ISSB, the International Sustainable Standards Board, and the raft of regulations that are coming out of a variety of jurisdictions. We're starting to see commonality, and much needed commonality of definitions. This will be hugely, hugely helpful for all parties involved in the whole sustainability, the whole green area. One person's sustainability is not necessarily the same as equivalent to the next person's definition of sustainability, but it needs to be and has to be.
Right. Last question from my side. How purchase of carbon credits or investment in carbon projects offset their emissions, and how far it is helpful in your ESG compliances?
Yeah, carbon offsetting. Now that's a debate to be had as to the effectiveness of that. I think in certain situations, offsetting is a legitimate activity where that carbon cannot otherwise be designed out of a process, for example. If it's an absolute product of that process or service that can't be avoided, then carbon offsetting is something that is recognised as being something that is a legitimate activity. And there, so somebody's getting directions I can hear in my head.
No, it's not for us. It's not
I thought we were being directed out of here. But no, and look, for my own organisation, the ICGN, we carbon offset our events, for example. So the delegates that are coming, that are flying in, we recognise what that carbon footprint is, and we will offset that through a recognised partner. Working with the right partner is really, really important on the carbon offsetting to avoid any claims of greenwashing, of course.
Right.
But I think that the airlines have got into trouble with carbon offset. So the cases I talked about, sort of KLM, Etihad, and sustainability claims, part of their argument there was, well, we're offsetting, so we're green. So I don't think there's a neat answer to offset.
Yeah. Okay. From audience. Any questions? Yeah.
The panel's talked about the dangers of both greenwashing and green blushing for companies. How would you suggest, or what guidance could you give to directors and boards trying to strike a balance between those two things, of not overclaiming but not being overly modest?
Yes. No, he will be the best person because it is pertaining to UK, so he'll be in a better position.
I think the challenge for boards is it's not really greenwashing, it's green blushing. So greenwashing, there's an issue there which has been addressed in the wrong way. And what you often find is where companies are subject to have got involved in greenwashing, that gets elevated up to the main board. And then the main board puts in place new processes, new procedures, brings some more staff in to control that risk. I think the bigger risk for companies is green blushing and the balance between what they want to say, what they don't want to say, and whether they get it right or wrong. In some ways, bringing more guidance and regulation into the sector is going to help all of that. But it's a very, very difficult balance, and I would find it quite difficult to advise a board as to what the right answer is on that. We sometimes struggle to advise boards as to whether or not they ought to be making stock exchange announcements on transactions or whatever it might be. It gets much more difficult when you're taking a judgment call on whether you should be saying something about a green credential or not. So I guess that would be my take.
Fine. Since there are no questions, one more last question from my side. Is there any role playing from International Sustainability Standard Boards, which we are looking forward to? International Sustainability Standard Board, which is coming out with guidelines.
Okay, so yeah, the ISSB will be coming out. They're consulting on S1 and S2, their first drafts, which are, by the end of this year, we will see the full implementation of those, along with their consulting on priorities for what should come afterwards. So the first two exposure drafts focusing on the broad remit of sustainability, and second one focusing in on greenwashing or environmental matters, as it were. And then they'll be looking to expand that further post that.
Fine. Thank you. So we conclude our session here. Thank you, both the co-panelists, for enlightening and sharing your views on the difficult subject. Thank you.
Thank you.